My parents added my brother to my $185,000 retirement account, but they didn't know I had already moved every dollar. Mom said, "He has a family. He deserves access to your future." I smiled, perfect. He can retire on the 8 cents I left. The woman from the brokerage called on a Tuesday morning while I was pulling sourdough rounds out of the oven. I almost let it ring. The area code matched my parents', and I had been half expecting a call from Yvette about Sunday dinner. But the voice on the other end was not my mother's. It was a compliance officer at Ridgewell Financial. She said her name was Dana. She said, "Miss Callister, we received a request to grant Spencer Callister authorized agent status with full withdrawal rights on your investment account. We need your authorization before we can process this change." I set the tray down on the cooling rack. The bakery was quiet at 6:40 in the morning. Faye was in the back portioning croissant dough, and the front lights were still off. I could hear the bread cooling. I could hear Dana breathing on the other end, waiting for me to say something normal like, "Yes, of course, he is my brother. Go ahead." "Who submitted the request?" Dana paused. The request came from a party with limited trading authorization on the account, a Yvette Callister. The request was accompanied by a family hardship letter, my mother. My mother submitted a request to give my brother withdrawal access to my investment account. She used the limited trading authorization she had been given when the account was set up as a custodial brokerage fund 15 years ago when I was 14, when my grandmother Odette died and left $50,000 for me. Not for the family, not for Spencer, for me. Odette's will was 1 page. The language was specific. The money was mine. "No," I said, "do not process the change. I want to revoke all trading authorizations on the account effective immediately." Donna asked if I was sure. I told her I was. She said the revocation would process within 24 hours and that the agent request would be denied. Then she said something that made me grip the phone harder. "Ms. Callister, I should let you know that the hardship letter submitted with the request references approximately $22,000 in unsecured credit card debt belonging to the proposed agent. The letter describes the situation as a family financial emergency. $22,000. Spencer owed $22,000 in credit card debt. And Yvette put that number in writing, in a letter attached to a request on my account to convince a brokerage to give my brother withdrawal access to money he never earned. I thanked Dana and hung up. I stood in the bakery kitchen holding the phone with flour on my apron and the sourdough still warm behind me. The ceramic bird sat on my kitchen windowsill at home 3 miles from here. And I thought about it standing there in the early light. Odette had kept it on her own sill for 30 years, pale blue glaze, one wing slightly chipped from when I dropped it at 7, and she glued it back without saying a word about it. She called it the Watcher. It sees everything, she told me once, even when the people do not. I almost let the brokerage process the change. Almost told the compliance officer it was fine, that my parents knew what they were doing. But I kept hearing Odette's voice, and I kept seeing the card she left in the account folder, handwritten in blue ink, for Margot. Only Margot. That card was in my nightstand drawer at home. It had been there for 15 years. The ink had faded slightly. The instruction had not. That afternoon, I called Ridgewell again. I asked about initiating a full account transfer to a new brokerage. The representative walked me through the ACAT transfer forms. I filled them out at my kitchen table after my shift, still smelling like sourdough and butter, still wearing my apron because I forgot to take it off. The transfer would move the full balance minus any residual interest that posted after the settlement date. I asked how much would remain. She said probably a few cents. Rounding and accrual. 5 business days. That was all it took. By the following Monday, $184,999.92 had landed in a new account at a brokerage where no one named Callister had trading authorization, agent rights, or even a phone number on file. The old Ridgewell account stayed open with 8 cents in residual interest. 8 cents. I left it sitting there like a receipt nobody asked for. I filed a formal complaint with Ridgewell's compliance department that same day. The complaint was straightforward. A party with limited trading authorization, retained from a custodial account setup over a decade ago, had submitted a request to grant a third party full withdrawal rights without the primary account holder's knowledge or consent. I asked the compliance team to review how that trading authorization was never revoked when the account converted from custodial to individual at age 18. That was their process failure. My parents exploiting it was a separate matter. My parents did not know the money was gone. They did not know the complaint existed. They believed Spencer had withdrawal access. They believed $185,000 was waiting for him, and they invited me to Sunday dinner the following week to discuss the family finances. Yvette used those exact words. I said I would be there. If you are new to this channel, welcome to Betrayal Unfolded, where real people share their stories of family betrayal, broken trust, and the moments they finally stood up. If this story resonates, subscribe and stay for the ending. It earns itself. My grandmother Odette died when I was 14. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late, moved fast. She was 72. She had lived alone in a small house with yellow siding and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and something in the oven. She washed dishes by hand above the sink even though she had a dishwasher. She said the dishwasher made the glasses cloudy. The last time I stood in that kitchen, she was sitting at the table with a cup of tea she was too tired to finish. She told me about the account. $50,000. She had saved it over 20 years from everything she could set aside. Small deposits, Social Security checks, birthday money she never spent, tax refunds she put straight into savings. This is yours, she said, nobody else's. Promise me you will keep it. I promised. I was 14. I did not fully understand what I was promising. But I kept the promise anyway. Odette's will left everything to her 3 children except for one line. $50,000 held in trust for Margot Elise Callister. The attorney who handled the estate told my parents the money should go into a custodial brokerage account until I turned 18. My parents set it up at Ridgewell Financial. They were given limited trading authorization to manage the fund on my behalf. The setup was standard. The authorization should have been temporary. I turned 18, then 19, then 20. The trading authorization was never revoked. Nobody at Ridgewell flagged it. Nobody in my family mentioned it. The account converted from custodial to an individual investment account in my name, and my parents' authorization carried over like a clerical afterthought. I never thought to check because I never imagined the people who set it up would use it against me. At 19, I started contributing. $350 a month from my bakery salary. I made $36,000 a year before taxes. That $350 came from everywhere. I packed lunches 5 days a week. I drove a 12-year-old Corolla with a crack in the windshield I never fixed because the quote was $400, and $400 was more than a month of contributions. I skipped vacations. I wore the same work shoes until the soles went smooth, and Faye told me I was going to slip on the bakery floor and break something that insurance would not cover. 10 years. 120 months. $42,000 in contributions on top of Odette's original $50,000 plus growth. The account hit $185,000 in February. I checked it once a month on my phone, sitting on my kitchen stool, looking at the ceramic bird on the windowsill. The numbers grew slowly, the way bread rises. You cannot watch it happen. You just check later and it is bigger than it was. My family never asked about the account. They never asked how much I had saved or how I managed on $36,000 before taxes with $350 going straight into the account every month. Spencer made $78,000 as an insurance adjuster. He had a mortgage, 2 kids, a wife named Claire, and a Chevy Tahoe with a monthly payment he mentioned at every family gathering like it was a medal he earned. My parents talked about Spencer's life like it was architecture. Load-bearing walls and square footage and blueprints that made sense. They talked about mine like it was a side project someone started and forgot to finish. Yvette introduced me to people as my daughter who works at a bakery, not my daughter who has been with the same business for 7 years, not my daughter who opens at 4:30. Just the bakery, with a pause after the word, as if she was waiting for the other person to fill in something more impressive. Spencer she introduced differently. My son, the insurance adjuster. He just got his CPCU designation. She knew the acronym. She did not know what I earned per year. She did not know my contribution schedule. She did not know the account existed in any meaningful way until 3 months ago, when Spencer told her he was drowning and she went looking for a lifeboat that belonged to someone else. 2 years ago, Spencer asked me for $6,000. He said his car needed a transmission rebuild and the repair shop wanted payment up front. I transferred the money that week because that is what I did. Spencer asked. I gave. He said he would pay it back in 3 months. 3 months passed, then 6, then a year. At Christmas, I mentioned it lightly, the way you mention a borrowed book you would like back. Spencer laughed and said he was waiting on a bonus. The bonus came in January. He bought a grill. When I brought it up again at Thanksgiving, directly this time, Yvette put her fork down and looked at me the way she looks at waiters who bring the wrong order. He has a family, Margot, let it go. Spencer did not even look up. He kept chewing. Hugh adjusted his napkin. Nobody at that table thought $6,000 of my money was worth pausing the meal for. $6,000 that took me 17 months to save. 17 months of packed lunches and declined after-work dinners and a cracked windshield I learned to see through. I let it go. That was the rehearsal. The retirement account was the performance. Yvette had always handled the family the way she handled dinner. Portions were not equal. They were distributed based on who she believed needed more, and need was always defined by what she could see. Spencer had a mortgage, so Spencer had obligations. Spencer had kids, so Spencer had responsibilities. Spencer had a wife, so Spencer had a life that counted. I had an apartment, a used car, and a bakery apron. In Yvette's accounting, my life had a low overhead and no dependents, which meant my resources were surplus, available for reallocation. What she never calculated was that the surplus was the result of discipline she mistook for simplicity. She saw a woman who frosted cupcakes and drove an old car and assumed the money was small because the life looked small. She never once considered that someone earning $36,000 a year might be building something worth $185,000 precisely because she lived like someone who earned $36,000 a year. The morning after the brokerage called, my hands were shaking pulling trays. I dropped a sheet pan loaded with almond croissants. Faye caught it 6 inches from the floor. She did not ask what happened. She set the pan on the rack, looked at me and said, "Whatever it is, you already know what to do. You just have not done it yet." I stayed at Odette's table for 10 years because she asked me to. She said family is the people who stay. She never said what to do when the table turns against you. But I think the answer was always the same one she gave me about the money. Keep what is yours, and do not apologize for it. I drove to Sunday dinner in the Corolla with a cracked windshield. The same car I had been driving since I was 17. The same car Spencer once called a death trap at Thanksgiving while talking about his brand new Tahoe's lane departure warning system. I had checked the new account that morning. $184,999.92. Untouched, unreachable, sitting in an institution where no Callister had access and no Callister could file paperwork. The drive to my parents' house was 14 minutes. I drove it the way I had driven it every Sunday for 10 years, past the same strip mall and the same gas station and the same church parking lot that was empty because services ended at noon. The only difference was that this time I knew what was waiting at the table. They thought Spencer had withdrawal access. They thought the money was there. They thought I was coming to be told not to tell. Sunday dinner was roast chicken, bread rolls, and the good plates Yvette only used when she wanted the meal to feel important. Spencer was there with Claire. Hugh sat at the head of the table, cutting the chicken into portions that were always too small. The dining room smelled like rosemary, and the windows were closed even though it was early March, and the house was warm enough that my collar stuck to my neck. I sat in the chair closest to the kitchen doorway. I had been sitting in that chair since I was 9. Spencer sat across from me. Claire sat next to him. She was 7 months pregnant with their 3rd child, and she kept shifting to get comfortable, one hand resting on her belly. Hugh poured water for everyone without asking if anyone wanted something else. Yvette brought the rolls in a basket lined with a linen cloth she ironed for occasions like this. The meal moved slowly. Spencer talked about a claim he processed at work, some homeowner disputing hail damage. Claire asked about Hugh's garden. Yvette refilled the bread basket. Normal, rehearsed, everyone chewing and smiling and saving the real conversation for after the plates were cleared. After the meal, Yvette cleared the plates. She stacked them on the counter, wiped her hands on the dish towel, and sat back down. She folded her hands on the table the way she does when she has something to say, and has already decided the room will agree with it. We need to talk about the family finances. She looked at Spencer first, then at me. Your father and I have been thinking about this for a while. Spencer has a mortgage, 2 children, and another baby on the way. He has real obligations. We thought it would be responsible to give him access to the investment account Grandma Odette started for you. We submitted the paperwork 2 weeks ago. Spencer now has withdrawal rights on the account. She said it the way she says everything, like the decision had already been made and my job was to receive it. When did you submit the request? 2 weeks ago, like I said. Did the brokerage contact you after you submitted it? They said they would handle it. Yvette waved a hand. The account might as well have been a magazine subscription, and you assumed they would process it without calling me. Her expression flickered, a fast tightening around the jaw. Then she recovered. Why would they need to call you? We are on the account. We have been on the account since the beginning. Why did you not ask me first? That is when Yvette leaned forward. Her voice dropped. It got specific. It got aimed. Because we both know what your answer would have been, and it would have been selfish. Your brother has 2 children, a mortgage, and a career that actually requires a degree. You frost cupcakes, Margot. You are 29 with no husband, no house, and no plan for any of it. That money is wasted sitting in an account for a future you are never going to build. Spencer sat with his arms crossed. He nodded once. Not a big nod. A small one. The kind that says I agree and I was expecting this and I deserve what is coming to me all at the same time. Claire looked at her plate. Hugh studied his water glass like it contained instructions. If you are still with me on Betrayal Unfolded, stay for what happens next. Because the number on that screen changed the temperature of that room. I almost told them right then. Almost opened with the account balance and skipped the questions entirely. But then I watched Spencer nod at the cupcakes line. He agreed with it. He was not ashamed of what they did. He was sitting in that chair, waiting for his share of money I earned 435 hours of bakery shifts for, and he nodded. I let the silence sit. I let Yvette's words fill every corner of the dining room and settle like dust on the good plates. Then I asked, "How much do you think is in the account?" Spencer unfolded his arms. About 185, maybe more with the quarter. Would you like to check? I took my phone from my pocket, opened the Ridgewell app, and slid it across the table face up. The balance was on the screen in black numbers against a white background. Spencer reached for it. His lips moved slightly, reading the number. Then they stopped. $8. 8 cents. Residual interest that posted after a $184,999.92 transfer settled across 5 business days. A number generated by a system that does not care who is sitting at the table or what they were planning to do with money that was never theirs. Spencer set the phone down. Gently, the way you set something down when you realize it is not what you thought it was, and what it actually is rewrites the next 6 months of your life. His hand stayed next to the phone like he was afraid to pull it back. Yvette reached across the table and pulled the phone toward her. She stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her left hand gripped the edge of the table and her knuckles went white. The tendons in her wrist stood out. Hugh looked up from his water glass for the first time all night. His face was blank, not shocked. Blank, the blankness of a man who knew this was possible and hoped it was not. Claire leaned over to look at the screen. She read the number. She looked at Spencer. She looked at Yvette. Then she sat back in her chair and placed both hands flat on her belly like she was protecting the baby from the conversation. "Where is the money?" Spencer's voice was flat, not angry yet. Confused, the confusion of a man who walked into a room expecting a check and found an empty desk, and a new account at a different institution. One where none of you are authorized, named, or known. You moved it, not a question. I transferred it. A standard ACAT brokerage transfer. Legal, documented, and final. Yvette's hand was still on the phone. Her fingers were pressed against the screen hard enough that the display dimmed from the pressure. "You had no right to do that." "I had every right. It is my account. It has been my account since I turned 18. Your trading authorization was a leftover from the custodial setup that should have been revoked 11 years ago. You used it to try to grant Spencer withdrawal rights without my knowledge or consent. The brokerage flagged it. They called me. I said no." Spencer pushed his chair back, not standing, creating distance. His jaw was tight, and his arms were back across his chest like a man bracing for impact. Claire was watching him now. Her eyes were moving between Spencer and me, and her hand on her belly had gone still. Grandma Odette left that money for me. I was not shouting. I was not whispering. My voice had weight because the words had weight. Her will said, for Margot. Not for the family. Not for Spencer. I contributed $350 a month for 10 years from a bakery salary you call a joke. I built that account to $185,000 while frosting cupcakes. And you tried to hand it to someone who did not earn a single dollar of it, without asking me, without telling me, using authorization you should have lost when I was 18 years old. I looked at Spencer. You make $78,000 a year. You needed my retirement savings. You sat at this table and let Mom submit the paperwork, and you nodded when she called my job a joke. You borrowed $6,000 from me 2 years ago and never paid it back, and when I asked for it, Mom told me to let it go because you have a family, like I do not have a future. I looked at Claire, asked him about the credit cards. Claire turned to Spencer. Her hand moved from her belly to the edge of the table. What credit cards? Spencer said nothing. His jaw was working, but his mouth was closed. His hands went flat on the table. The color in his face drained from the forehead down, like someone pulled a plug behind his eyes. His breathing changed. Shorter, faster, the breathing of a man who just realized the conversation he thought was about his sister's account is now about his marriage. 3 months ago, your husband told Yvette he was $22,000 in credit card debt. Debt you did not know about. Yvette submitted a hardship letter to the brokerage with my account request describing Spencer's financial emergency. She put the number in writing, $22,000 of unsecured debt attached to paperwork on an account that is not his. I looked at Yvette. She did not submit that request because she believes in family. She submitted it because she was trying to bail Spencer out before you found the statements. Yvette stood up fast. Her chair scraped the floor. You do not know what you are talking about. Spencer has obligations. He has responsibilities you could not understand because you have never built anything in your life. You frost cupcakes and come home to an empty apartment. That is not a future. That is a holding pattern. Tell me something, Mom. When Spencer came to you 3 months ago and told you about the $22,000, whose idea was it to use my account? Yours or his? The room shifted. Yvette's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Spencer's head snapped toward his mother. Claire's hand stopped moving on her belly. How do you know about that? Spencer's voice was low, almost a whisper. The whisper of a man who just heard his private problem announced at a table where his wife was sitting. You told Mom, and Mom wrote it in a letter to my brokerage. She attached your debt to a form on my account, signed her name to it, and sent it to a compliance department that keeps records. I let that land. Every dollar of your $22,000 is in a file at Ridgewell Financial with your mother's signature under it. Spencer looked at Yvette. You put it in writing? I did what I had to do. Yvette's voice was rising. Her hands were gripping the back of her chair so hard the wood creaked. Hugh pushed his chair back from the table, not standing, just pulling away. The first movement he had made all evening that was not pouring water. Claire turned to Spencer. What credit cards? Spencer, what is she talking about? Spencer said nothing. His jaw was clenched. His fingers were pressing into the table hard enough that his nail beds were white. It stopped being a family matter when she filed paperwork on my account. I stood up. My voice had weight now. Every sentence had 10 years of 4:30 mornings behind it. You stole from me. That is what this was. You used authorization. You should not have had to hand my money to someone who did not earn it. Yvette submitted the paperwork. Spencer sat here nodding. Hugh sat here and let her do it, the same way he has handled every problem in this family, by letting Mom decide and looking at his plate. All three of you treated my savings like a fund you could raid because the person who earned it frosts cupcakes, drives a cracked windshield Corolla, and does not have a degree. I looked at Spencer. I built $185,000 from a $36,000 salary, every dollar, every month, for 10 years. What did you build with $78,000? $22,000 of debt you hid from your pregnant wife, and you had the nerve to nod when Mom said, I have no future. Yvette's fingers were white on the chair back. Her breathing was fast and her shoulders were pulled up near her ears. That money was supposed to help this family. I looked at her, and for the first time all night, I smiled. A small one. Not cruel. Earned, the kind of smile that comes from 10 years of waking up at 4 a.m, packing lunches in tinfoil, and counting $350 like it was the most important number in the world. Grandma left that money for me. He can retire on the 8 cents. Nobody spoke. The clock on the dining room wall had a second hand. I listened to it tick 3 times before Claire stood. She did not look at Spencer. She looked at Yvette, held the look for 3 full seconds, and walked to the front door. She opened it herself. She walked to the car alone. Spencer stayed seated for another 4 minutes. 4 full rotations of the second hand. Then he pushed back his chair and followed. Claire was already in the driver's seat. He got in the passenger side without speaking. The headlights came on. They pulled out of the driveway. Yvette was standing at the table holding the dish towel she had picked up without knowing it. The account at Ridgewell is closed to all of you. The money is in a new institution where none of you have authorization, access, or standing. I filed a complaint with Ridgewell about the unauthorized modification request and the hardship letter. Your names are in that complaint. I looked at Hugh. He still had not spoken a single word all evening. Both of your names. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. Do not call me about money again. Do not call me about Spencer's mortgage, his kids, or his problems. The $6,000 he never returned is now the most expensive car repair in the history of this family. And the next time you want to talk about my future, try asking me if I have one first. I walked out. The door closed behind me. The porch light was on, and the March air was cold enough that my breath was visible for 2 steps before it disappeared. I sat in the Corolla for a full minute before turning the key. The cracked windshield caught the porch light and split it into 2 lines across the glass. I had driven to that house every Sunday for 10 years. I would not be driving back. 7 days later, Yvette called. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was controlled in the way voices sound when the person has already rehearsed the message twice and is still not sure it sounds right. Margot, Spencer's blood pressure has been through the roof since the dinner. Claire is 7 months pregnant with their 3rd. The stress is affecting his health. His doctor told him his numbers are dangerously high. If something happens to him, if the stress puts him in a hospital, that is on you, Margot. You need to think about what you did to this family. I almost answered that call, almost picked up and told her what I thought about a woman who steals from her daughter and then blames the daughter for the consequences. But I looked at the ceramic bird on the windowsill. It was still there, still watching. Odette was still watching, and she would not have answered that call. She would have let the silence do its work. I listened to the voicemail once. Then I opened a new message to Claire. I attached the audio file. No text, no explanation, no commentary, just the voicemail. I pressed send. The voicemail did what words cannot. It arrived in Claire's phone without interpretation, without spin, without Yvette's version of events. Claire heard Yvette blame me for Spencer's health. She heard a woman who tried to hand my savings to someone else now calling me the problem. And she heard it in context, because Claire had been in the room when the 8 cents appeared on the screen. She knew what happened. Now she knew what Yvette thought about it. Spencer transferred the $6,000 to my bank account on a Tuesday. No message, no text, just the deposit notification at 2 a.m. The same $6,000 he borrowed 2 years ago for a transmission rebuild that I now suspect never happened. $6,000 arriving in silence says more than 6,000 words would have. It was not an apology. It was a debt repayment from a man whose wife had spent the weekend going through 14 months of credit card statements he thought were hidden. Claire told me 2 weeks later what happened after the dinner. Not as gossip. As a receipt. She found the statements that weekend. She went through every charge, restaurant tabs at places they never went together, online purchases she never saw arrive at the house, subscription services she did not recognize. The total was $22,000 spread across 2 cards, and the minimum payments had been coming out of an account Spencer told her was for car maintenance and home repairs. She asked him where the money went. He sat at their kitchen table and could not account for half of it. She moved their joint checking and savings accounts to her name only that same weekend. She added herself as the primary on the mortgage autopay. She told Spencer his financial access to his own household would be whatever she decided, and she was deciding. They were not divorcing. But they were not the same couple who drove to Sunday dinner together. Claire drove her own car now. She arrived and left on her own schedule. Spencer rode in the passenger seat when they went somewhere together, and he did not ask where they were going. The family group text went silent, not deleted, just empty. No Sunday dinner invitations, no birthday reminders, no photos of Ethan's kindergarten art project. The chat sat in all of our phones like a room with the lights turned off. 3 weeks passed. Nobody typed. Nobody left. Nobody acknowledged the quiet. Ridgewell's compliance review was ongoing. Institutional reviews move at the speed of paperwork, and paperwork does not care about family dinners. My complaint was logged and assigned to an internal review team. They were examining how trading authorization carried over unchecked from a custodial account for over a decade. Nobody was going to prison. But my parents' names were attached to a formal complaint about an unauthorized modification request, and the hardship letter Yvette signed was part of the file. That file would sit in Ridgewell's records for years. If Yvette or Hugh ever tried to serve as authorized parties on any account at that brokerage again, the flag would appear before the first form was processed. If you have been listening to this story on Betrayal Unfolded and you know what it feels like to be the one your family treats as surplus, the one whose savings are invisible until they are useful, leave a comment. Your story matters. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. 3 weeks after the dinner, on a Sunday afternoon, Spencer's 5-year-old son Ethan was sitting at Yvette's dining table. The good plates were not out. The roast chicken was not on the counter. It was just Yvette and Ethan, and the table had one empty chair where I used to sit. Ethan looked at the chair, looked at the bread basket that was smaller than usual, and looked at Yvette. "Grandma, why does Aunt Margot not come to dinner anymore?" Yvette was holding a serving spoon. She did not answer. She stood in her kitchen, in the same spot where she had explained to me why Spencer deserved access to my future. And she looked at a 5-year-old boy asking a question that had no answer she was willing to say out loud. The spoon was still in her hand. The pot was still on the stove. Ethan waited. Then he went back to pushing carrots around his plate. Hugh had not spoken to me since the dinner. He had not texted, had not called, had not sent a message through anyone. He was the same man at 61 that he had been at 45 and at 38 before that, present in every room, visible in every photograph, and silent during every single moment that required him to choose a side. Yvette was living in a kitchen, where she had tried to rearrange her children's futures the way she rearranged dinner plates. She moved things where she wanted them. She decided who got the bigger portion. She decided whose career counted and whose was a phase. She decided whose financial emergency justified raiding someone else's savings and whose savings were too small to matter. And the one variable she never accounted for was the compliance officer at Ridgewell Financial, who picked up the phone on a Tuesday morning and asked one question, "Miss Callister, do you authorize this change?" "No," one word, one syllable. The same word I should have said when Spencer asked for $6,000. The same word I should have said when Yvette told me to let it go. The same word Odette would have said if she had been alive to hear what her daughter was planning to do with the $50,000 she saved over 20 years of small deposits and uncashed birthday checks. My apartment was quiet. Late March light came through the kitchen window at an angle that caught the ceramic bird on the sill. The chipped wing, the one I broke at 7, the one Odette glued back without a word. The glue had yellowed slightly over the years. You could see the repair if you looked closely. But the wing held. It had held for 22 years. I sat on the kitchen stool and opened my phone. The new brokerage app loaded. The account balance filled the screen. $184,999.92. Every dollar Odette left. Every dollar I saved, every $350 I pulled from a $36,000 salary while my family talked about Spencer's mortgage like it was important and my future like it was optional. I closed the app, looked at the bird. Odette called it the Watcher. It watched her bake for 30 years in a kitchen with yellow walls and glasses she washed by hand. It watched me pack lunches and count contributions and drive a car with a cracked windshield past a strip mall and a gas station and a church parking lot every Sunday for 10 years. It watched me sit at a table where my savings were treated like family property and my job was treated like something I would outgrow if I ever found a husband. The chipped wing caught the light. 22 years of glue holding a repair that Odette made without a lecture, without a condition, without asking for anything back. She fixed what I broke and never mentioned it again. That was the difference. Odette gave me $50,000 and asked for nothing. Yvette spent 11 years sitting on trading authorization, and the first time she used it, it was to hand my money to someone else. Faye texted me that evening, just a photo of the bakery display case, freshly stocked for the morning. No caption, no question. She knew I would be back at 4:30 pulling trays and portioning dough and doing the work my mother said was not a career. She knew because she had watched me do it for 7 years without missing a shift, and she had caught the sheet pan the morning the world shifted, and she had said the only thing that needed to be said. The bird did not move. The money did not move. And I was done sitting at tables where my chair was the one they planned to empty.